This is
It needs to go up like 20 more pages. Okay, everybody. Hello. 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 Now, Grace couldn't be here, so Luke, are you the one that's operating the...
After you broke it.
Yeah, alright, twice. Don't fix it.
Like I said, I'm going to separate you two. It's very interesting. Okay. Sorry. It's more and more interesting. So I'd like to start off by saying an apology today for missing some of your tutorials. I know a lot of compatriots are not here, but anyway, so they're missing this class, but still, I'm sorry about that. I was in a zillion meetings, so this was it. Now, we divided the room last week. Those people that are going to try one half of the libidinal economy, and those are going to do the other half. Does anybody remember this division?
Okay, mate.
No? No.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you say yes? Yes? Nobody remembers that. Okay, good. Then we will begin again. Can you get to page 20 on that? And now the other thing is, while Guy is doing this, if seeing that we seem to have, yeah, just one more, one little more, that page, yeah. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. That's perfect. Okay. Pardon me. Could we just go around the room very quickly, once again, and just say who you are in one line? You can make it up, it's fine.
Hi, I'm Kirsten, and I make work using time-based film and video.
Great. Yeah, where are you situated?
I work on my own in my own studio, which is at home,
Yeah.
And I work in school as well as a teacher.
Yeah, wow. So you're exhausted, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Di. I'm an artist working
Working what?
in Digbeth.
In Digbeth, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm Anna Rutter's friend, and I lecture.
You're a what?
Anna Rutter's friend.
Oh, Anna Rutter's friend. I really misheard that. Yes. Well, that's nice. I think that's very good to be known as Anna Rutter's friend. That's a very important thing. Okay.
I am Tanya. I am on the Master of Science Practice and Education, and I'm looking at technology and effects that comes from business practice.
Great.
I'm also doing masters in fine art in here.
On this couch.
Yeah, on this couch all my life. I'm interested in text and relation to text to body, and then body to image, and maybe text to image. All of that.
Great.
Hi, I'm Ivan, MA in Queer Theory. I'm part of a collective of artists called Amai, and I'm focusing now on performance art and the engagement with the audience.
Great.
I'm Sarah. I'm on the MA Art final course, and I do drawings and
And you're tearing them up. And are you going to reuse them as torn up scenarios?
I'm tearing them to make them smaller.
That's kind of interesting.
Painful, but good.
Huh. And so you draw something, then you
I
tear
have a
it.
drawing and then I'm tearing to make.
Wow. I do that with clothes. I throw them in the washing machine. Gone.
Francesco, I'm an artist. I like painting and writing, and maybe I'm going a bit more into performance. And I paint here. I take notes when I paint, trying to do it.
Great.
Hi, I'm Jo, and I'm doing MA Art Practice and Education, second year part-time, and I teach in a secondary school as well. And I'm looking at investigating how objects might help teach us something, or objects that might learn from objects or objects learn from us. It's kind of interaction.
Do you know, what's her name, Kristen Anderson's work? Andersen.
Yes,
I'll give you. Yeah, that's right. Good. All right, we'll do that later. I'll give you. Yes.
No, I know you.
Okay. Okay, I'm Anne Lorenz. I'm on the MA Fine Art, and I cut things up, or I use the same.
Okay, we got something going on here. You two. Okay. Okay. Do you cut your own projects up or other people's?
No, at the moment I cut either metal, I stamp either metal or paper. And I try to create forms from the grids, but work with both aspects. And I try to work quite quickly. I've started since a few days where I try to not think too much about what I do, so I try to create pieces that are really quickly done and then assess later. So I don't really know where it's leading me. But
so you do a kind of fast art thing?
I suppose it's trying to break out of a very structured way of working and see what it holds if I don't ponder over it too much, and then reflect on it once it's done instead of trying to understand what I'm doing before I even start.
Makes sense. Okay. And you're Anna's friend.
John, I'm working as a teacher in a secondary school, and I'm on the practice in education first year, and my practice is using film as a paint on film and use that as a source to explore nature of paint, and it turns out that I'm also interested in how that works with the body.
Great. Interesting. Is that new that you decided to see how it works with the body?
It's always been there actually. It's always been in. I think I've got the fluids.
The fluids, the pore and the products.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Excellent.
Dane J. Warlow. Transmedia installations, gradient spaces, digital environments, binaric fun, and stupid films.
Good. Excellent. Johnny. Oh no, wait. First we'll do Johnny.
No, cool.
No, go on.
All right. My name's Johnny. Johnny, that's J-O-N-N-Y.
No H.
No H. I'm on the MA in Philosophy and Aesthetics, and currently investigating the loss of skills and craftsmanship and art that's been degenerated, now looking into rural and urban environments.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's good. Excellent. Now,
Clovis, MA Fine Art Practice. I'm from Singapore. I'm kind of like interested in system. I have no particular medium. I'm just interested in system.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Stella, Art and Project Management. It's a weird week.
Okay.
So I think I would say films, audiences, creativity, festivals, music, how all these can work together, something like that.
Okay, why is it a weird week?
Because something like that, I don't know exactly.
Oh, I see. Good.
I'm Hannah, I'm doing fine art. I'm interested in identity, the body, grave anatomy and sculpture. To be continued.
That's excellent.
I'm Liberal Mason. I'm interested in transhumanism and performance art.
Great.
Stuart, I'm stuck in the same place. That's it. Place, interested in place, work with place.
Yeah, we'll get you up that one track.
Yeah.
Go on.
I'm Andre. I've just applied to be on this course with Johnny starting in September. I interviewed on Tuesday. Apart from that, I run a curatorial project called Vinyl, and I've got practice on the side as well that I'm busy making work in the Central Library at the moment. It's going to a show and a publication.
Oh, brilliant. Great, good. Okay, want to shut the lights off? And Yvonne, could you put the light on behind you? It's no, it's on the top. It's on the top of the couch. That's it. Yep. And then this one. Is that too dark?
I love you people.
Dark enough.
Oh yeah, exactly. Okay. I wanted.
Could I close the door?
Are you going to be painting in oil?
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be a
No,
little
then.
difficult. What?
No,
It's very difficult.
yeah, sorry. To leave it open because it's going to smell.
Yeah. Is that all
If
right?
it's a problem, I just don't paint with oil. So I can close the door. So you want.
Okay, group, make a decision here.
Open it up.
Yeah, keep the door open. Keep the door
It's not a
open.
problem.
And nobody's, anybody that comes around, we can just bring them in. Just, they can be just, sort of innocently walking by and snag them. Okay, right. Now, I asked you to look at libidinal economy, the ephemeral skin piece again, because I wasn't convinced that you were getting it. I say that very respectfully, but it's a tough thing. This skin, this ephemeral skin. It's great ephemeral. So the question I first want to raise is, or want to draw to your attention, is on this page. It was on the introductory page. It's actually on the glossary page, page 20, XX. Actually, if you just put one more page so I can see what was the word that they were trying to glossify.
Leotards.
Oh, that's it, leotards, thank you. Okay, never mind, sorry. It's so hard to, sorry about that. Okay, the reason I wanted to look at page 20 is because, is that he writes about this thing called, he refers to his writing as a form of hysterical anxiety. And I like that. I wanted to draw it to your attention. I wanted to make sure you could see it, could hear it, and get a sense of this. I can see that for whatever reasons this PDF has left out letters. So the actual piece reads hysterical anxiety, as Lyotard writes, signals not that the god is too far away, but that he is too close. Intimacy with the gods without seeing their faces would not be too far-fetched a description of libidinal economy. Anyway, so what I wanted to draw to your attention with this paragraph here is that he's trying to talk about, in this case, why his writing, and one could extend that and say all forms of text in the biggest sense of the way in which a narration is exposed, requires a kind of what he calls irresponsibility. This is like you're ripping or you're cutting, or you're kind of like, it requires something that, it requires taking seriously, not being overly serious. So something around this, or to put it again a different way, I told you to start, the Libidinal Economy was his fuck you book, but it's also what he refers to as his evil book. And he refers to this as an evil work because the translations into English lose the muscularity of the poetics of how each sentence flows. So he is a very visual writer, if you can understand what he has this way of trying to say what he's trying to say, not in a direct sense, but in a way that, because of the way the words are juxtaposed to each other, they bring forth something else. And that's very hard to translate, because obviously they're trying to translate the work and at the same time bring in the irresponsibility of the work, and that's a difficult one. But further on, he was criticized by quite a few people, And he actually responded to one of his critics, which you should never do, by the way. It will only cause you grief. You know, I mean, you're always going to get bad reviews. I mean, just how Shakespeare got bad reviews, Freud got bad reviews, Einstein wasn't let into college. I mean, honestly, just you know, just try not to respond to too many reviews unless you just have to. But he basically, this guy named Van de Abely, he basically said that that Lyotard needed to be responsible, and Lyotard responds that his work is heterogeneic, and he says that if the heterogeneity of my work passes by the reader, it also passes by me, insofar as I am my first reader. I'm pointing this out because this is going to be the context around which we're going to sort of get into this skin again, this ephemeral skin. We're going to try it from a different angle today. However, I am also the supposed author of my work. And you asked me about my responsibility with regard to it. Well, we never publish anything except rough drafts. And in this sense, I can, without lying, plead limited responsibility. That is to say, a reader cannot incorrectly locate in a piece of writing an aspect which, according to me, is not there at all. Did you hear what is being said here? Can you, further down, he writes, the translators write, that this is a scandalous position. I can without lying plead limited responsibility. It is tempting to pursue a sanity trial or even to subject Lyotard or his work to tensorial scrutiny. Scandalous. We shall momentarily shift our concern to the multiplicity of discourses. And then he goes on about how many Lyotards are in this book. So, if you read that paragraph again, if the heterogeneity of my work passes by the reader, it also passes by me. So the first is the use of the word passes. And the word pass is not only to go by something, but is to give it to somebody to check. You know, so when you pass something by somebody, you're both taking it like through a tunnel or through a passageway, and at the same time you're asking them to take a look at it. So that's where the responsibility comes. That the performance of the passing by is actually engaging the entities that are passed by to bring them into the responsibility of being present. So he's demanding his reader, he's demanding himself to be present. And that's scandalous. And the question is, of course, why is that scandalous? So he says, again, it passes by me also insofar as I am my first reader, which is very different than saying, I am the author and you are the audience, as it were. He is also the audience. So the very first reader of anyone's work, of your own work, is yourself.
But would that as well imply that when he writes, he does it almost just very fluidly without censoring himself? So being his first reader means he very consciously then reads over it.
Yeah, but again, it's that double entendre, because it's like he reads over it, but he both covers it and recovers it, like saves it. Okay. So to recover something is again a play on a word. To recover is to take something that, let's say, has a ripped upholstery and put something on it, cover it over, to hide it.
Yeah.
But it's also to bring something, to heal something, to recover. Right? So he's playing with this double thing. And again, it gets you to that first sentence that the book starts out with, who knows not how to hide, knows not how to love. And again, I want to keep bringing this back so you can begin to hear what is involved in that. Because he's not saying you must learn how to be underneath the table, hiding, and when you're, lover comes in, you go boo, you know, and then that's like, you know, he's not talking about, what's that?
Surprise.
That's right, exactly. You know, he's not talking about that form of hiding. So we're going to get this very subtle thing that's happening here. Okay. And then he also goes to say, I am also the supposed author of my, in quotes, work. And you ask about my responsibility in regard to it. So he's already getting annoyed because the fact that he has written this text, he wants to claim immediately that it's not just him who has written this text. It is the history that has written this text in this way. Another way of putting this, the old-fashioned way of putting it, the old Marxist-fashioned way of putting it, is that that Mozart was a genius, but he didn't invent rock and roll. And he didn't invent rock and roll for a number of reasons. And it wasn't just because he thought it was a bad idea. It wasn't even an idea. And Elvis, you know, is a genius. But Elvis hasn't invented atonal music. And again, one begins to see what's the relation between the historical context in which, you know, these kind of brilliant pieces of work come out, and why is it that they didn't invent, you know, in this case, Mozart didn't invent rock and roll. So he's basically saying, my voice is a multiple voice anyway. And to make sure you realize this every second of the minute of the day, I'm going to write in many voices. And that is going to make me evil. And that is why this book is evil, apart from the fact he hates pretty much everybody that he's dealing with in the book. Another issue. So it's very important that you get this side of it. We never publish anything except rough drafts. And in this sense, I can, without lying, plead limited responsibility. What does that mean? In this sense, if we never publish anything except rough drafts, what is he as author, as reader, making sure happens?
There's going to be some change.
That's got to be raw.
That this is
Yeah, and he's taking responsibility for that to happen. And that's where he will take the responsibility. But he won't take the responsibility to take you by the hand and reveal what he's saying, because there's nothing to reveal.
So he's not claiming to know the truth. He's just saying that it brings in a sword on, I think.
He is claiming to know the truth. The truth that he's claiming is that it's got to be a rough. It's got to be rough.
Right.
It can't be smooth, as it were. That he is claiming the truth. So he's not just saying, oh well, let's just be spontaneous. Let's all have group spontaneity, like group hug or something. He's not doing that. Yeah. Oh, there was a breath in this direction. No, there was no breath.
Is he?
Sign of life.
Unclaiming.
No, that's what you're saying. No.
Is he unclaiming being the author because the reader authors the book?
Yes. But he's also claiming to be an author. He just wants to disembark or disengage from the notion of my I, possession self, came up with this great idea and I've written it down. And instead he is trying to jump around. Of course he is writing a book. He's not, you know, writing an atonal piece of music. So in writing a book he is saying something. He's not trying not to say something, he is trying to say something with this libidinal economy.
Does he mean that since he's the author and the first reader, that what he writes is going to be there for everyone? Because he is at the same time author and reader?
I think that what he's actually saying is that in order to be a good, strong artist, you have to remember that you are at the same time the first reader or the first, you know, participant in the work. And if you forget that, if you make up an audience, if you decide that, you know, like in marketing sometimes, there's an argument that happens where you try and guess what the audience wants. If you try and do that, you try and guess what the audience wants or guess what the audience might understand, then you've made up this audience. They don't exist, and you must first speak, it must first speak to you. If it doesn't speak to you, it ain't gonna speak to anybody. Do you understand? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. But I'm saying, like, since he's the one who writes it and the first who reads it, that he takes that distance and not become the audience, you say, like the marketing audience, like the authentic audience.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows how to deliver the message in a better way.
Yes. Like if he, it's a certain kind of narcissism. It's an important form of narcissism. It's the best form of narcissism. If you can't please yourself, it's not going to work for anybody else. But it's a masturbatory form of narcissism. So it is a pleasing, it's a sexual pleasing. He's like, if you can't do that to yourself, for yourself, your work is going to flat, it's going to fall. So some of this work, some of the writing in the thing, I think is practically unintelligible. And I think in part that is because of the translation couldn't translate the erotic into what was being said here. And because a lot of times when you're reading something that is heterogeneically put together, then you're reading something in addition to what is actually written on the page, clearly. The same thing if you see a piece of work, something pops out, then you're seeing a bit more than what is literally there. And if that doesn't do that moment, then he's saying that in order to do that, you must figure out how to be both author and receiver. And what is that relationship between the two, especially when they're the same person. Okay, and if they're the same person, that relationship is going to form a skin. And that skin is going to be your ephemeral skin. And that ephemeral skin is going to become a great ephemeral skin, as opposed to a small and tiny ephemeral skin. So you got to understand where he's going to start building on it. That's why I want to draw your attention to. He is not just talking about pagan Pagonomics, yeah. Okay. I give that to you as a present. He's not just talking about pagan theatrics, there we go. Just because he just feels like talking about paganism, or because it's cool to mention it. There's something about the atheism as a religious relationship that he's getting at. This atheism, this religious way of understanding one's work, for him and for most people who talk like this, it has to fall into an erotic zone. If it doesn't, it's not going to work. And the problem is that because he writes visually, the translation of it's just like trying to translate your own work. It's very difficult to translate your own work. Let's say for those of you that try and take photos of, for a portfolio, it doesn't translate a lot of times, or sometimes the translations are even better than the work. So it depends. But if it's able to create this kind of bulb that happens, so that the work then is also allowed to hide. I just like to make sure. So on the one hand, he's talking about the heterogeneity of the author. That the author is always plural. The author is at least two people, minimally. And those two people are both, the maker of something and that entity that will receive over there, there. You see where he's going with this? Pushing the little boat out. Who talks about the there? What other lunatic uses this expression? Heidegger, yes. What does he call Dasein? Very good. So let's just keep remembering how we're going to play with this. He's going to set up, rather than having Dasein in the Heideggerian move, it's you. You here, you here. And that's going to set up the distance that you need in order to create, that's like the beginning of the distance. And then the next problem is the irresponsibility of it. Now what do you think he means by irresponsible here? And don't say not responsible. What does it mean to be irresponsible?
To be not rational.
Okay.
To break out.
To what?
To break out.
To break out, yeah. To break out of what?
The rational.
The rational. Okay. Okay, that's it?
Childish, playful.
Yep, absolutely. And as I have mentioned already today, at least once, it takes a long time to become a child, you know, and so just don't forget to do that to yourself. Because usually for a lot of people, especially if you come from like difficult backgrounds, you know, your childhood was like a complete, you know, waste of space, you know, for yourself, you know, and then, you know, usually in those kind of environments, how artists are actually born. They're actually born because it takes them a long time to become a child, basically, and you just keep, because you have that taken away as a child. And he's beginning to talk about, you know, what happens when you learn the plurality of the self. Then there's an irresponsibility to it because you're not willing to bend to the there. You're not willing to submit completely to superego or to the societal positions. If you must, then you send out a little clone of yourself that does all the submitting, and the other one has to do all the kind of crazy dancing and stuff like that, you know, and then you come back. It's very important. He gets the problem of how, in order to make sure that you live and you survive and you are loved, at least minimally by yourself, that you know how to hide. Beginning to hear what he's saying? Those that do not know how to hide, do not know how to love. You need to figure out how minimally. Now, he's not talking about binarisms. He's talking about heterogeneity. And he's talking about it in a paganistic sense, so we haven't even gotten there yet. I just want you to focus on how this is beginning to go here, and why it is understood as scandalous. I mean, if everybody, you know, did not take responsibility for anything, it'd be difficult. So he is taking responsibility. It's an odd form of irresponsibility. It is this child play. But children can be quite nasty little creatures. So, you know, he's not talking about, you know, just, I don't know, you know, again, I go back to The Wizard of Oz, which all of you must, you know, watch, you know, when they're skipping through the poppy fields. You know, he's not talking about this, like, you know, happy-go-lucky moment. He's talking about hardcore, bad ways, you know, complex ways to be, well, to be. Now, I think we're ready to go to the great ephemeral skin. On page 2, I think, or 2's up here. Oh no. Can you find it?
Page 2.
Yeah, page 2. That's going to be a lot further down. Now. Now, you remember how we read that one paragraph several times last week? Excellent. Found the page. got it, right? We got the, on page, you're on page 2, excellent. So, actually, can you just go back to page 1, just so we need to hear that paragraph one last time.
You know how much stick I got from public hair. You should read it, Hannah.
Go on.
Do you know this bread I bought today is called Sphincter?
Is it? Where did you get it? Sex shop. That's right. Go on. Oh, you don't want to read it. Stuart, you want to read it? Can you see? Can you put that light on behind you? There you go.
So the whole of that first paragraph.
Yes.
And slowly.
And slowly, and you know.
And do you want the titles as well, the chapters?
Why not? Yeah.
Okay. 1.
Which book?
The Great Ephemeral Skin. Opening the libidinal surface.
That's too fast.
Okay. Open the so-called body and spread out all its surfaces. Not only the skin with each of its folds, wrinkles, scars, with its great velvety planes, and contiguous to that, the scalp and its mane of hair. The tender pubic fur, nipples, nails, hard transparent skin under the heel, the light frills of the eyelids set with lashes. But open and spread, expose the labia majora, so also the labia minora, with their blue network bathed in mucus. Dilate the diaphragm of the anal sphincter, longitudinally cut and flatten out the black conduit of the rectum, then the colon, then the sacrum, now a ribbon with its surface all striated and polluted with shit, as though your dressmaker's scissors were opening the leg of an old pair of trousers. Go on, expose the small intestine's alleged interior, the jejunum, the ileum, the duodenum, or else, at the other end, undo the mouth at its corners. Pull out the tongue at its most distant roots and split it. Spread out the bat's wings of the palate and its damp basements. Open the trachea and make it the skeleton of a boat under construction. Armed with scalpels and tweezers, dismantle and lay out the bundles and bodies of the encephalon, and then the whole network of veins and arteries, intact, on an immense mattress, and then the lymphatic network and fine bony pieces of the wrist, the ankle. Take them apart and put them end to end with all the layers of nerve tissue which surround the aqueous humerus and the cavernous body of the penis, and extract the great muscles, the great dorsal nets, spread them out like smooth sleeping dolphins. Work as the sun does when you're sunbathing or taking grass.
Actually, the next paragraph.
And the next.
Can you get there?
Yeah,
and this is not all.
Yeah. I'm just seeing how far that goes. I'm sorry, is that going on to page 3? Yes,
Sorry, I didn't want you to read that then. You can just stop there. What did you hear, Anna, on this one? Can you talk to this in relation to your work?
Yeah, it's the spread out all the surfaces, the inside and the outside becomes the inside. The words like dilate, opening the leg of an old pair of trousers, that sort of the visual translation of the cut and the opening, and then being inside something and that coming out.
And how is that skin then? Because normally you would think of skin like this. And then if you're taking the skin and you're cutting it and opening it like an old pair of trousers, literally pulling it one way and pulling it the other way, why do you think that this chapter is then called The Great Ephemeral Skin? What is the great, yeah, Stella?
I'm just thinking that it creates another skin.
Good. And what is the other skin that it creates? It's the famous S word. that Luke loves so much.
Surface.
So see, Luke, you've helped the class so much with your public purr and your surfaces. Okay, so it creates a surface. What does that mean that it creates a surface?
In the footnote it says a film.
A film.
And it's like a visceral commentary on existence, really, isn't it? Everything that's opened out and everything that's... You've got another one, then another one, and the folds, it goes on about folds a lot. And,
yeah.
And getting in, and they become openings to something else.
Yeah, and you keep...
Squeezing it.
You open it up, so pretend this is the leg.
Yeah.
You open it up, and then what happens? What's inside there?
Another leg.
It's not another leg inside the leg.
Another layer.
Sorry. But is there ever no layer and another layer?
Dimensionally, probably isn't.
Right.
It's all the same.
Right.
You can go in and move it, move around.
So at some point,
So
when you flatten everything out, at some point, what do you have in front of you, other than a very dead person?
Something very thin.
Something very thin. Yes, actually, that's true. But seriously, why would this be called the great ephemeral skin? What happens when he does this whole thing where he gets into all the different areas?
This is all our being. This is all we are. This is the physicality of this all. But the folds are not physical. There's something in there that I don't quite understand.
You're getting there, yeah.
It's not. You can open it all out. You can keep on opening it all out. And it's all on the other end. But the things. It's like a squeeze.
Yeah. Okay.
And he's getting that really, I think, you can keep on thinking of another thing. When he goes on about representation, doesn't he?
Yes.
Not.
Don't go there yet. Don't go there yet.
Is it like breaking? Sorry.
No,
sure.
It's very sensual.
Yes, go on.
I was going to say sort of mutability, the sort of the ephemeral is changing something.
Okay, good.
So there's time.
Okay, so what is it?
Temporality, isn't it? Ephemeral.
Yeah, and what does that mean? What does ephemeral literally mean? Why call it ephemeral? Why not call it the great temporal skin?
It's because it's sensuous. It's
always changing.
Yeah, it's changing, but go back with the sensuous.
It's sensuous and
I have to beat you guys over the head with porn, so you don't forget the sensuous. Sexual, yes. With the words, Yes.
And sensation. It's
okay.
not sensual. It's the sensation.
They were so good.
It's not recorded. It can't be recorded as soon as it's experienced. It's gone. And there's another surface. And it's continuing. But you can't go back. It's ephemeral. You're in that moment.
Okay.
But it can't be recorded. You have to experience.
Well, he's not really talking about experience here, but he is talking about the first part, where you're saying that you're present. There's a presence here.
Yeah, but there's no. When it's ephemeral, you're in that moment.
Yes.
As soon as you're aware that you're in that moment, it's no longer ephemeral.
Why
It's
not?
the next moment.
Why can you not be aware of it?
Because then you're aware of being aware of it.
Okay.
So, my understanding of ephemeral comes from Stanislavski acting. As soon as you're aware of, the example is you ask someone to walk across a room. As soon as they're aware that they're being asked to walk across a room, they're hyper-aware and they're walking. It's no longer ephemeral because they're constantly thinking about, am I walking in the right way?
Okay.
So
I see.
It's experience of just walking.
Right, okay.
Without mediating.
Oh, I see, okay, all right, now I see what you're saying. Okay, now I see what you're saying. Right, so in other words, if you start rationally unfolding something, then you've lost the ephemeral.
Exactly,
Yes, but
yeah.
that doesn't mean you can't be conscious of it. It's just that you can't. You have to be differently conscious of it. You have to be. You have to. It's awake. It's trying to awaken this other logic, the logic of the sensate.
Wax on, wax off.
Wax on, wax off. Yes, very good.
Off, so.
Yes. No. I figured. Yeah. Just don't go further. Yeah. Stuart. So, is that what you were?
Yeah, and then I was thinking about is it because it's something you're doing to yourself? This thing, the you and the you. So in a way, it couldn't ever happen.
It's close. It's close. Yes, Stella?
As I see it, it's like you have the skin and then you tear it apart and you have parts of it and you have to invent what to do with those parts over and over again. This is why it's ephemeral, and it's like breaking the rules or something like that.
Okay, except that the parts aren't like laying around like, you
No.
know, like books on the table.
But you have to reinvent something because these parts, I don't know if get to another word, but these things were working together underneath the skin, and now they are out of it, but they are still something, so you have to find out what to do
Okay,
with
but
them.
he's not talking about like opening up a tree trunk and, you know, or breaking an egg. He's talking about the human body, and it's quite visceral. You know, he's not pulling any punches here. He's not talking about, I mean, I think the only thing that could go further is if he had said to do this to little children or something like, you know what I mean? There's a kind of immorality that's being, I mean, it is a little bit intense, you know, when you're reading this. I mean, I think.
Is it about exposing oneself?
Right, okay, we're getting there now.
So really, in some sense, exposing the exposed, but as well being there.
Yes.
So really, being in the moment while doing.
And why would that be an ephemeral skin?
Is it because you can only do it once then, in a way, in one form?
And that's what you were saying.
Yeah, but is this coming back to him being the author and the reader?
Yes.
It's doing it to him, so coming once to him, and then second to the next reader.
Right, you can only have a once,
Yeah.
even if it's technology. Because I mean, in other words, even if it's a photograph, is what I meant, or something that would have a reproducibility to it that would be without an origin. He's basically saying that there's something going in here that's sensate. That you need to get a sense of how, you need to get an understanding, but not in a rational sense. You need to try and think logically with your hands. Or logically with your elbow or something. I don't mean hands, just in the making of sense, the making of things. Though he does in a minute, I'll get into this. And he basically is suggesting, and this is what the difficult thing is, which you haven't quite gotten yet. He's suggesting that this notion of ephemeral film or ephemeral skin does have this temporality to it, but the temporality has to do with the once, the singularity. So on the one hand, you have this heterogeneic author, so you have this heterogeneic entity, and on the other hand, you have the relationship to it as a singularity. I'm just going to use that term just so you get used to hearing it. Singularity, heterogeneic, singularity, heterogeneic, singularity. So the heterogeneic part becomes what he will later define as a zero, as a concentratory zero. As a kind of a zero that has something in it, but the something that's in it can't be deduced from a logic. there's something that's in it. Well, it's part of this. It's part of how, as John was saying, how the folds begin to take shape. So, if we go now to page, I'm not 100% certain we got that one, but I just want to get past.
It's like losing your virginity. As in, you can do it once, you experience it while you know you're experiencing it. And it happens. So you can't, and it's ephemeral. Ephemeral just happens in 1 second, kind of like an orgasm later on. You kind of try to go to repeat that moment.
Yeah.
So that time it's different. So is that
Yes.
something like that in this area?
Yes. And why is that important? I mean, Quentin Crisp has a really wonderful line. You know, he has a great book on how something like it takes a long. His version of Picasso's "It takes a long time to become a child." His is "It takes a long time to become a virgin," and he is totally hilarious because he basically decides he's a virgin with everyone he meets, because it may not be his very first time, but it's his first time with that person, and therefore that's the virginity. And that's also fantastic. So if you ever get a chance to read any Quentin Crisp, C-R-I-S-P. Yes, Johnny.
Just going from that is comes over with virginity, exploring the crevices and nooks and crannies that need to be explored to reach that climax point.
Yes.
So it's touching the surface until you've fully ironed out all the folds as it is, and then you can't go back to it unless, like you said, if it's with a new partner or with somebody new, whether it's through like an erotic experience or as it is with this, what we explained there.
Does anybody find that erotic? You know, the first paragraph that we've now probably memorized. You found it erotic. I mean, kind of.
I don't know, it's just this exposure.
Yeah.
Being able to expose something that.
Yeah.
It's erotic.
Yes.
It's touchable.
Yeah.
Sensual.
Would
Makes
it have?
You want to do it.
Would it have been?
Not okay. Serial killer moment.
That's right. It happens, you know. But would that have had the same thing if we had said, open the folds of this table and see?
No.
No, and why not?
Because the skin is the fact.
We're talking about doing it to us, aren't we? We've got to feel it.
Yes. Good.
Yeah, there's quite a tenderness to it, isn't there?
Yes.
In all of it.
Yes, brilliant. So even though it's rather sadistic, it's a tender sadistic.
Yeah.
We touched on that
Yes,
last week.
Johnny.
So it's sort of the same feeling when, it's like on the news when someone there was a live TV broadcast when it shot in California, but they will show it and you don't want to see it because it's, but there's something behind you that
compelling.
Goes, compelling. You've got to watch it, or
you
see something shown on something explicit or something that's disgusting, and you have to watch it. Like the beheadings like in Iraq and stuff. There's people, you want to watch it, and it's a bit, you question yourself, your own moralities about it. But it's that sort of, there is the question of that erotica in the back of your head going, I want to see it.
Okay. What were you going to say? You were talking about this earlier?
We were talking about that last week, weren't we? We talked about violence, because I didn't find it violent.
Right.
There was a bit of a split, I think, wasn't there?
Yeah. About half the group did find it violent. About half the group didn't.
I also was just, I don't know, was it here last week? Was somebody saying about somebody's head being exploding? It's a beautiful thing. Where did I hear that?
Yeah, that was
Was that here last week?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, okay. I was thinking, it can only have been here.
That's right, yes. Thank you. Okay, so now what he gets into, what he's going to start to build in this this question of the skin is this relationship between, let's say, kindness or a certain kind of generosity to a certain kind of sensitivity, maybe that's the right word, and at the same time, the acknowledgement of pain. He's going to now lift a rock and find an artist or a writer or a philosopher, somebody always going on about pain and the importance, you know, you must suffer for your art or whatever the story is, you know. He's not talking about that kind of pain. This is not, so what he is talking about is something that operates, that allows the pain to trigger pleasure. And if the pain doesn't trigger the pleasure, then it's kind of not worth the pain. That's basically what he's getting at. So I'm just going to throw that into the thing so you can hear it. Just let it land on you a little bit. Now he then develops an attack. He begins his attack on representation by page 4. And I'm taking this very slowly with you because I want to make sure that you don't just get it because I'm saying it, but that you get it because you can actually, you're immersed in it, you can see how it's operating. So the first aspect of this argument is about how the logic of sensate is being put forward. He's putting it forward as a surface, but the surface has folds, or the surface is a weird surface, because the surface has depth, and the surface has dimensions, and so on, so it's a kind of odd surface. So why call it a surface? We'll just park that for a moment, but it's a surface. And this surface, this skin thing, this film situation, he says is more honest than, and certainly more accurate, and so honesty in this accurate sense. So it's both honest is a moral term. So he's being moral here. He's saying, be honest. The pain, when it works, is exquisite. And if it doesn't have that, the work is not going to work. This is how he's trying to develop it. But he doesn't want to just claim it. He doesn't want to say, look, you know, here, I've got the secret about how, you know, how to do great art. Here's how you do it. No one could hear it, that's the first thing. But second of all, you can't tell it this way. You have to come to it sideways. You have to see sort of how he's saying, how he's developing this. So what he does is he tries to attack this notion of representation that is put forward in semiotics with the sign and the signifier and the signified, which Daniel should have gone over, I think, in detail. Did he? He did. Okay, good. Anyway, and in this relationship, he has a problem with the sign, the signifier, and the signified, because he argues that it closes the field and it doesn't allow for the logic of the senses to come into it, except in a kind of social science position. And what he wants to do is say that even in science, social science, any form, if you're missing the sensuous in the argument, you're not going to be able to get beyond very flat forms of mathematics, otherwise known in philosophy as rationalization, or, you know, very, very problematic rationing. So he says that what he is trying to develop is how an opening creates a closure. How an opening creates an environment around which meaning can take place. How an opening, let's say, like the great ephemeral skin, can create a segment, like a deep cut. This closure and this form of opening, which later in the course we'll get into via Einsteinian moves, this particular closure opening thing, he says, is completely different than the kind of stuff that you see in representational logics, which is infiltrated art, theory, philosophy, science, and he, you know, has issues with it. So on page 4, he says, If we can get, can you do page 4? Thank you so much, Di. See what happens when you sit in the class? It's like driving. I know it's like driving. It's very difficult. That machine is so annoying. Well done. Okay, that's it. He says here, we should not continue to confuse the closure of representation, that sarcastic discovery, that sham of dropping of the scales from our eyes, by those thinkers who come and tell us what is outside is really inside. There is no outside. Who come and tell us what is outside is really inside. There is no outside. The exteriority of the theater is just as much as its interiority. Don't mix up this sad piece of news, this cacadulism, with which is only the other side of evangelism, this wretched news that the artifact bearers running along with their little wall, sorry, he gets carried away, running along their little wall behind the backs of slaves who are bound and seated at the bottom of their cave, do not even exist, or what amounts to the same, that they themselves are only shadows in the cave of the sunlit world, reduplications of sadness. Don't go confusing this crestfallen message and this representation of entirely closed theater with their Mobian labyrinthine skin, single-sided patchwork of all the organs, inorganic and disorganized, which the libido can traverse. So let's just make sure this is clear-ish. Yes, Johnny?
Is he taking a pop at Plato there?
He's taking a pop at all of them.
All of them,
yeah. This is his fuck you book.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so pretty much everybody falls into that category. Even he falls into the category at one point, you know. This makes me feel, when I first came to this country, I felt the English are such a funny group, you know, because they hate everyone. They even hate themselves. You know, it was impressive. Like, I lived in Canada for a while. Everybody wanted you to become Canadian. You know, it's like, oh, you're from the U.S., that's fine. Get rid of it. You know, you're Canadian now. You come here, it's like, hi, I'd like to be English. Are you kidding? But your heritage, do you have anything English about you? No, you don't. Even if you did, you couldn't. You have to live here like 5,000 years before you can become English. You know, it's just anyway. So it's maybe his English book. So it says here, sorry, I started to go on about that. For all the people who...
And we're proud of it.
I know!
I know! So, yeah.
It's shocking. Anyway, if you go to where let's look again. We should not continue to confuse the closure of representation with our Mobian labyrinthine skin, the single-sided patchwork of all the organs. So what does that mean? What are you hearing when you don't, you know, if you speak the talk of representation, it's going to have outsides, it's going to have insides, it's going to have out and insides, it's going to have no sides. He says all of that is just a sham, because the way in which the semioticians, and I said this with love when I realized that we have a semiotician in the room, but you're being very good, you're being very quiet. Is your head exploding now?
No, I'm cool with it.
Everyone can have their ideas as long as they're, no matter how wrong they are. Okay. Right. So he's basically saying, don't mix up the sad piece of news, which is that there is no outside, there is no inside. Don't mix up the sad piece of news, this, what he considers as a form of evangelism, which is representation, this wretched news that the artifact bearers running along their little wall behind the backs of slaves who are bound and seated at the bottom of their cave do not even exist. Or, and obviously he gets into a complete, you know, hysteria. You can see where he starts getting hysterical now. I mean, you just wonder if he's drinking while he's writing this or something, because he just starts going on, talking to himself, you know. In fact, I came up with a better example. No, wait. Here, what about this one? You know, like, we can throw in Plato while we're at it, you know, in the cave. You know the story of the cave. Everybody knows the story of the cave. Does anybody not know the story of the cave? And I don't mind telling. You don't know the story of the cave.
Oh, I do.
Oh,
Been living in a cave.
Okay, well, maybe your story of the cave. There was a lot of enthusiasm. Okay, all right, so we won't go into the story of the bloody cave. Okay, so now, so the thing is that he's saying that you have this Mobian strip. Remember when we did the Mobius strip, the single-sided, the singularity, that economy, he's calling it, that libidinal economy, incidentally, which libido can traverse. For however well it is closed upon itself. I gotta read it from here because I'm dropping words. Where is it here? Yeah, okay. For however well it is closed upon itself, it too, like a good Mobius band, is not at all closed in the sense of a volume. It is infinite. And contrary to the representative cube, intensities run in it without meeting a terminus, without ever crashing into the wall of an absence, into a limit, which would be the mark of a lack. There is nothing the libido lacks in reality, nor does it lack regions to invest the slender and very dark finger of her left hand, which, in a conversation, the young woman, anxious because she is afraid of what she believes to be your erudition, passes over her eyebrow, while on the other hand she pulls out a cigarette. Here is a real region to invest. One can die for it. One can give all one's organicity, one's ordered body, one's functional arrangement of the organs, one's memory of organs, one's socio-professional status, one's supposed past, and one's supposed future in the flick of putting your finger on your eyebrow. What do you read when you see this? He's saying, really see what's happening. If someone does this, it actually can mean one's socio-professional status, one's supposed past, one's supposed future, one's agenda, and one's intimate theater. One can feel like paying very dearly, exorbitantly for this finger. He's talking about how you must use your sensate logic to get the there, bring it to yourself. Especially if you start becoming, you're also the there. It's very, very complex here. Okay, now let me go back. And then of course, he finally gets into, he couldn't get too far without mentioning the vagina or the ear, so he goes on. One's memory of organs, one's socio-professional status, one's supposed past and one's supposed future, one's agenda and one's intimate theater. One can feel like paying very dearly, exorbitantly for this finger, which is like an engraver's stylus, and the whole orbital space, cranial, vaginal, that it engenders around the eye. You got all that from this one little move. And he's asking you to do the same. And not just to do it because it seems like an interesting idea. He's trying to build an argument here. So let's continue. And it is not because it is prohibited that it is invested, not because it is represented beyond a stage set and because one hasn't the right to climb onto the stage, but because one desires to climb up there and seize it. So one of the attacks about representation and the semiotician argument and the questions around phallus and lack is that one never reaches desire. That, in fact, the Slavoj Žižek school of thought, one of my, I have become practically rabid about Slavoj Žižek, so you have to calm me down if I start going on a speech. But Slavo has had such an amazing impact on, particularly on our art schools, but not just art schools. And he makes the argument that desire is always something that you go after, but you can never get there. And if you do get it, then you don't want it, which does explain a lot about his relationships, I feel. But doesn't necessarily mean anything. Because what Lyotard is saying is exactly the reverse. Desire exists. Desire invest is what he calls it. This thing invest. Your libido invest. It's kind of like a different form of the Bataille move. Bataille is always talking about expenditure. Your libido, it is the tracker. It invests. It doesn't have a position on investing. It just invests. And what he's saying in this investment is that in that way the pleasure emerges. In that way you have something that bubbles up. The libido never fails to invest regions, and it doesn't invest under the rubric of lack and appropriation. It invests without condition. Condition is rule and knowledge. This is coming from the man who wrote the postmodern condition. It invests without condition. Condition is rule and knowledge. But the passage of emotion on the hand stroking the eyelid, what does it matter if it obeys rules, laws of emotion and other nonsense? What does it matter what causes the woman's shyness before your supposed personages, obviously paternal? What does all this matter, this hodgepodge of words which will give us an account and do the accounts? It is these words which set about representing the gesture and produce it in the exteriority internal to all discourse, and the law that they invent in order to explain exteriority and the spectacle. It is their own law as knowledge. Oh, and then, do you mind if I just read this next bit and then we'll, okay. Let me explain this before I read it to you. So what he suggests is that this skin, this ephemeral skin, he's going to build it as the zero. He's going to say that this zero, and so, by the way, BBC, in our times, had a thing on the zero today. I think it was today. Anyway, if you go to the BBC website, Radio 4, sadly, you can see what I do in my spare time. Anyway, at least I'm not quoting from the Archers, which I also listen to. It's really sad. Anyway, but if you go to BBC Radio 4, he has, there's been a thing on the role of the zero in temperature, in finding a temperature zero. And it was quite interesting, just so you know. Anyway, he's saying that the zero is not an empty something. It's not a marker. It's not a lack. The zero is a surface. And this surface, he doesn't want to give the status of an ontology. He doesn't want to give the status of grounding the whole argument. He just wants you to understand that the zero, the great zero, and what he will later develop as the tensor band, the tensor, or the intensity, as the segment, that taken together, that creates the whole picture. The picture that doesn't have beginnings and middles and ends. So he basically is trying to say here that there's no deferral to a desire, that it doesn't keep popping away from you, but instead it allows for little deposits to be made on the surface of the skin, on the surface, we'll just say the surface of the moment. These little deposits can be made where the libidinal invest, or where the libido invest. It invests just like when you open the leg of the being. The investments are in there. And so he says, far from taking the great zero as the ontological motif imposed on desire, forever deferring, forever representing, forever stimulating, everything in an endless postponement, we libidinal economists affirm that this zero is itself a figure, part of a powerful dispositif, wise like the God of the Jews and pale like the void of the Lao Tzu, a concentratory dispositif, where of course several libidinal positions are affirmed together, which we make merry in disintricating and demonstrating with tact, and disengaging without shock, like Japanese, which is a fortunate way for this, like blades enmeshed in a fencing match. And we will show not only that it is not necessary to pass through it in order to follow the course of intensities on this labyrinth, but moreover, that the passage through the zero is itself a particular libidinal course. That the position of the signifier, or even of the other, is in the concentratory dispositif, itself an enjoyable position. That the rigor of the law gives more than one person a hard-on, and that this nothing is not a matter of ontological necessity, but of a religious fantasy, libidinal then, and as such, moreover, quite acceptable, that is, if we were not, alas, terroristic and deontic. We must model ourselves an affirmative idea of the zero. Discuss. Okay, what do you think that means? What's with this hard on? What does he mean here? Yeah.
Is he talking about the tragic sensibility that doesn't look away from pain? And it's a sort of jouissance, a sort of pleasure, tragic.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. It's not that he's thinking that the tragic is pleasurable in that sense. He's saying that, well, before I explain what he's saying, see if anybody else has a take on this.
Is he warning against the kind of devastating effects of representation?
Yes. And what is the devastating effect?
Well, I can only think of it in terms of news, actually, and about how news tells stories and represents
yes.
in a context of something that is quite limiting and restricting and very socially kind of determined, which I see as, I can only think of it in political, I can't really kind of respond to it politically, I don't know if that's right.
Well, I mean, he's
that
political.
he's saying, or
exactly
that we really must be so, we must be so, we must be sensual.
Maybe I'm not understanding what you mean by it. Sorry.
The tragic, well, the news doesn't have, and representation doesn't have a tragic sensibility. It's,
oh, I see what you're saying.
It's looking at something that's abject, like the opened leg and the veins, and it's abject, it's disgusting.
But he's not saying it's disgusting.
No, he's saying you give it its dignity and you don't look away from it. And that's my understanding of what tragedy is.
That's interesting. That in itself is interesting, but that's not what he's saying.
Okay.
It's close. It's close, but I don't think it's on the on that level of tragedy. But maybe, Yvonne, do you have a sense of what he's saying?
Not really.
Sarah? No?
It's a bit like the Freud's beaten child situation, so rather than sort of the rigour of the law, rather than sort of getting to fetish by the no, just the zero. There's no no. It's just this zero is everything. So you don't need to take part in that sort of rational thinking.
Right. Okay. Now we're closer here. I mean, you're not. If we could take the three positions here and kind of meld them together, we're getting there, in the sense that. Yes, I think if we start with the father's no. You remember the father's no. You know, you just no. You can't go there. Bad. Okay, so he's arguing that he's arguing against thousands of years of political philosophy, of art history, of, you know, different ways of looking at things, but more recently, from the semioticians onward, which would be Saussure, Ferdinand Saussure onward, so that's like the 1900s onward. He's arguing that if you move into this thing called the linguistic turn, and you focus on the way in which language displaces, and then we go back to the question of the Lacanian move around lack and phallus, and then the combination between the signifier, the signified and the sign. What gets lost in that story? What is the first tragedy of that story? Is that that the intensity of something doesn't show how it gets filtered into the picture. It's missing. It becomes what he calls capitalist religiosity. It's adhering to a model as opposed to understanding how you must be immersed in the situation. And that immersion includes dignity, pain, horror, and that can't be swept under the carpet. That is the carpet, or that is the whole piece. So in that sense, he's not saying give tragedy its due. He's saying that in order for any form of expression to happen in its I guess, best form of an aesthetic position, and that he's not just talking about aesthetics here, of course, but I'm trying to bring it back to where we're working. One cannot operate in a vacuum without desire. One cannot operate in an environment without desire. The desire, it's not that the desire goes after something and you can never reach it. The desire always reaches it. What do you do with that? Because it's explosive. It's dangerous. So he's not saying don't play with fire. He's saying, A, there is fire. Learn how to play with it so you don't get burned.
What came into my mind is that aspect of becoming human, that sense of that really understanding. I don't know if it ties in freely instead of kind of investing into the zero of to affirm that idea of zero, starting not from what one is perhaps supposed to do, but really what one ought to do within oneself.
Yes, I think that's.
Is it coming back to Adorno as well?
In what way?
Auschwitz comment.
It could be. Explain that. Explain yourself.
I did have it in my head as well. There was something you said before as well that made me think of that. About this thing having to exist, however terrible. It's not quite as a foil, that wouldn't be right, but it's too binary.
Yeah. Well, this is at least good. Like, you're not thinking in binary terms. I mean, this is excellent. Hannah, what were you going to say?
I was just thinking, yeah. When you were saying that, I was thinking,
the expressive group.
Yeah. But no, how terrible or whatever the moral outcome of your environment. Just experience it. You don't have to sort of feel like restricted by this is how you're meant to deal with a situation, or something thinking of like professional mourners or something.
Professional mourners.
Yeah.
That you were suddenly thinking of professional mourners.
Yeah. I'll get my coat.
What made you think of professional
I
mourner?
just thought, you know, this sort of.
Wait, what is a professional mourner? I mean, almost
I've been pretty good long time. You know, when you have
a profession of mourning.
this culture, but another culture where you just go and cry for 24 hours, and everyone just comes along and goes, just wails and cries, and yeah, that's it. Then you put your grief out and then move on, and it's sort of.
I have never heard of a professional mourner.
I think it's.
What's that?
It's definitely Turkey. I know it happens in Turkey.
They have it in some villages in Greece as well.
Well, you just go from town to town crying.
Well, when there's a funeral, they go
Okay,
with
is
the
that
body. They stay with the body and they cry, and that's it.
Wow.
It's like lament, isn't it? It's like overreacting kind of thing. It's kind of performance.
What's that?
Like a bit dramatic, a bit over to give importance to a person, and isn't it something like that?
Yes, I don't know the word, but yes, it's like over exaggerating, like Jakob said, like.
Is that what you're thinking?
Like singing and crying, something like that.
So hey, yeah, I used a story from my sister-in-law was saying about her father's funeral. He was from Istanbul, and it was just like you have 24 hours to get over it. Basically, just go. From when the person dies, you have 24 hours to the burial, and then within that time, everyone just wails. And even if you don't feel like crying, you go, ah, God, and like just let it all out, and kind of, and then it's expected that you've done that now. Now move on.
To another person who's died.
Yeah, to the next year, and we know there might be a bit of a gap, but so the next time someone dies and you go off and like, you know, if it's your great cousin that you've only met once, you still have to.
So the professional mourner actually does know some of the people.
Oh yeah.
So it's not like they just. It's not like, you know.
But I think it's quite.
You know,
Yeah.
what was that film? Anyway, I can't remember. Where this guy always goes to funerals and he.
Wedding Crashers.
No, it's not that.
But at the end of it, there's the guy that goes to funerals and.
Yeah, and he
funerals.
meets this woman who also goes to funerals, and that's and she's like 80. What's it called? Yeah, what's it? Maud is in there. Harold and Maud. That's like Henry and Maud, Harold and Maud.
It's just saying in China they get paid.
Yep, in Taiwan.
They get paid?
Yes, it's a profession, kind of like a performance.
Wow. So, okay, so now that so how did that get attached to this? Because you wanted to weep and cry. Just saying this.
Making me feel like that.
I kind of have it with the pain and pleasure.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking. When you mentioned that don't play with fire, you're gonna get burned, but learn how to play with fire, so
Yeah.
you won't get burned. So I kind of the pain would be how deep you can, how much surface there is you can find out or discover in some way, and then the pleasure is actually the sensual knowledge. So it's not pleasure as in.
Yes.
It's a pleasure as in, you know, it's a knowledge of some sort.
Yes.
It's a kind of
Excellent.
You learn something from both.
Good.
So that's the pleasure. So the pain is the ripping to create a surface in some way, and then the pleasure would be learning how to do things on this surface.
Yes.
Rupture.
Good. Can you repeat that?
No. No. So pain is creating the surface of some way. That's right.
Right. Okay.
How? And then the pleasure is actually the sensual knowledge. It's a learning through your fingers, through experiences, through senses.
Yeah, through senses. Yeah.
And that's
The experience. The word experience cannot be used in this class.
Yeah.
We're banning certain
Learning
words until we
through
learn how to use them. So you can't say perception, intuition, or experience. Those words do not happen here. Okay.
I'm now coming back to the calcomania traces.
Okay, good. Okay, how did that happen?
What you have to say about the wounding on the traces.
Excellent.
answer this.
Okay.
Right.
We're our professional mourners.
Those are there as reminding. They're saying that you've experienced that, but you're here. You've made it through these things that you have record of on you, in you. Well, no, sorry, well, not in and on you, but with you.
Okay, we're very, very warm. Very warm. So, Dane?
Could you equate Azure with a plane of imminence?
Yes.
As in, as opposed to something like, with a sign you've got transcendence, a sign always presupposes another sign, another sign creates that transcendence just goes on and on, doesn't really get to any heart of the matter, it doesn't get to the pleasure.
Dirty.
Yeah, it doesn't get to any
Greasy
sort
stuff.
of, no, it doesn't fulfill desire either.
Yeah.
But as the sort
That's
of,
why it's always lacking.
but as the sort of libido washes over the plane, is always that imminence in it that it can erupt at any sort of point.
Did anybody understand what Dane just said? Say it again.
So, with a plane of imminence, the libido washes over as it flows across this plane that's been set up on the surface. In that imminence, it can always, it's always ready, it's always to respond to desire, to erupt, to reach pleasure as a segment, in that segment, as opposed to, say, a sign which sort of just creates a chain of signs, doesn't really go anywhere. It's about creates a massive hierarchy which doesn't really solve anything, doesn't reach desire no matter how far it goes up or down or
Right.
wherever.
And why is that a problem that it never reaches desire?
Because you're sort of, you're not really going anywhere, there's no movement really, you just, it's not opening up, but it's...
We're so, now we're getting like very hot, you know. Anna? Okay, no, I thought you were going to say something, no. You just moved.
Well, the only thought that comes is that being in the moment, that absolute being there, from what Dane was saying, that what sparked it off, where I was thinking, if you're totally there, then, or here, or in the moment, then it's that being able to respond, to be responsive.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so now we're going to play a little game. So, Jakob, you repeat what you just said.
Pain.
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 Professional mourners over here.
Pain creates a surface on which, and pleasure, learning how to be on this surface is the pleasure. It's the sensual knowledge. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And it can only go as far as you get your fingers cut off. And well,
I guess, yeah.
The kind of as you is it playing.
Are you going back to your serial killer moment?
Let's go with fire then. Until you burn out, but kind of as much pain as you can handle and as much as knowledge as you can accumulate. And because
Okay.
pain creates pleasure, it's as much that as we can change.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is why this book is also a kind of textbook on some level on S&M, sadomasochism. Be clear, he's talking about how limits are established and how that creates this symbiotic relationship. There's not somebody that's the sadist and someone that's the masochist. It's sadomasochism. It's all one word. So in fact, in your rendering of this, the pain and the pleasure are together. They're not really, first you have the
No.
surface and then you have the pleasure. the surface and the pleasure are working together. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Which is how we get to decalcomania. Okay, can you repeat what you said about decalcomania? I know it was like one word, but maybe you could say.
No, it's as a record, as a trace that you've survived experiencing things.
Take out the word experience.
Thank you. It was unfair.
That's right.
Experience? Okay. Bad job.
Receiving?
No, perceiving is not allowed.
No, I said receiving.
Oh, receiving.
Yeah.
Possible.
It's too
John, what are you hearing in
Is it a record of an intensity?
this? Yes.
An event?
Yes. Ah, very good. You want to repeat that?
A record of intensity?
To them.
A record of an intensity of an event.
Now, what do you mean by that? Why is it important?
I didn't get ready for that one.
Okay. So what did you mean by that? How about that?
Intensity being what he talks about, something that catches your eye or gets you worked up, or colour, a wink, something that I don't know, inspires you, something that gives you a hard on.
He says, smiling. Yes, good. I think it's really important to let's talk. You know, let's really become children, finally. You know, in the best sense, best polymorphously perverse sense. Okay, now, how are we doing? Okay. So if we go down now, I mean, I'm not, let me say what's on the map so far. So you've got this. You've got this thing called a surface. The surface we now know has folds. The folds have investments. The investments are libidinal. Libidinal gives it its color, gives it its quickening, gives it its meaning. The meaning cannot be established via representation or the lack or the deep cut. The meaning can only get established in this relation between this kind of surface folded weird surface thing, this great zero, which is great because it's not empty. And on the other, not other hand, but on the other, in the other way of, the other additional feature is that it has, it is washed over with libidinal energy. And that energy creates these little investments, these depositives plus.
Sorry.
And in fact, the zero can also become a dispositive. So a libidinal moment on the surface can create marks, as it were, nodal points, as you have heard them called elsewhere. But the whole thing can be a dispositive on another surface. So actually it makes me think of your work, John, in terms of the way in which you were doing paint, the way in which you, it wasn't just so much that you were painting on film, but that it was calling up all different economies of desire and play and fear, and they started creating these little zaps that were made clear because of the relation between the film and the video and that hanging thing. Does that? Yeah. Are you seeing this, or are you just going yes?
No.
Okay.
Are you saying, did I make that because I understood it, and that was the process?
No.
No.
I said that
I
is
understand that is what is happening, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think it's happening in all your works, you know, like that. You just need to get a sense of how you're playing with this. Okay, so now if we just turn now to page 10, Oh, actually, no, hold on, we can go to 6, because that's going to be
I
there. Huh?
didn't see the pain.
What?
I didn't feel the pain in it. That's why I made it confused.
Don't shut that. You didn't see the pain in it.
But no, I didn't feel the pain.
Oh. So you made work that you didn't have any pain in. Lay on the couch. What happened to you? No, just kidding.
Oh, right, no,
did you not have a traumatized childhood?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. No, I suppose, yeah, in other senses, it's harder.
But that's not the pain.
No.
It's a different form of pain. It's the pain of pushing yourself to do something. Something like that.
Yeah.
Going past the limit, but not so far past the limit that you actually destroy yourself. Just enough. The intelligent form of pain. The
hiding.
The hiding. Exactly right. Very good. Very, very, very good. Okay, now, page 6, as we race through this chapter. Page 6, pagan theatrics. Now, I wanted to just draw your eye to that word, or that phrase, pagan theatrics. Because I want you to make sure you get how he's using this. And this is why I was sort of rejecting your thing around tragedy. Because I think that Lyotard would see that in this argument as being a form of religiosity. So in other words, he would not agree with the Bataille's question of the abject and the whole question of how one becomes prostrate to something. He's like not talking about transgression in this way. He's talking about it without the moral code attached. So it wouldn't be seen as tragic in that sense, because there'd be no moral or ethical involvement. It just is part of the investment. And so he gets into this question of how one tries to enter into this thing called pagan theatrics. And if you get down to the almost to the bottom of the page, he says, okay, where does this sentence begin? The man really has long sentences. Okay, so he says here, I'm just going to start with the sentence. We have, therefore, to leap over two frontiers, that which separates the political from the apolitical, but also that which separates the religious from the secular. We have to say, for example, that there is perhaps more atheism, affirmative, in the religion of the low empire which Augustine detested and ridiculed, this religion in which for the least hiccup, the least scandal, a copulation without issue, a birthing, a pea, a military decision, there was a god, a goddess, several gods and goddesses attending the act, the patient and the agent, not to double them in a pointless spectacle as Augustine appeared to believe, and no more to divest the alleged subject implied in the act in question of his responsibility, but because in this way all these gestures, all these situations, birthing, peeing, military, etc., copulation, all these situations in the life ever since called the everyday, as if there were another, on the one hand were valued as intensities, could not decay into utilities, and on the other hand did not have to be connected by a paradoxical, dialectical, arbitrary, terrorist link to an absent law or meaning, but on the contrary, being self-sufficient in their assertion, never failed to be affirmed as singularities. So, he's making a claim around the importance of having what he's calling an intensity that doesn't double something or doesn't try to make sense of it. It just affirms it. This is what he's grabbing in the theatrics. And he's calling that a singularity. And we'll get back to this because when we get to complexity theory, this is going to become important that you understand how these words are operating. Can I go past page 6, or shall we stay with page 6? Don, how are you hearing all this? Okay, nothing.
Go right here. Thank you.
Hands are on the table. How are you hearing this singularities, this pagan theatrics, this singularity? What does that mean?
It is. It's not a narrative. It's not us. It can't be explained away as a story. You know, if you think about PE and military decisions,
For example.
It's a singularity. It isn't rationalised.
Okay, we'll keep that word together, singularity and not rationalized for the moment. I think that'll help.
Something that's not representation. It can't be represented. It can't be doubled. It's just a singularity.
It's just a okay. Your students do that, don't you? Put them on the pole and say you can't use the word in your definition. You're close.
It can't be repeated.
It can't be repeated.
It's a single.
Okay, what else does singularity mean? That's good. What else does singularity mean?
So, is it self-sufficient? Does it exist for itself purposes? Self.
Okay, so singularity, we know that a Mobius strip has a single side, even though it's in 3D. Everyone remember the Mobius strip, right? Do I need to show that again? Everybody's okay with the Mobius strip? No more Mobius strip issues. You okay, Tanya, with the Mobius strip? You knew you weren't okay with the Mobius strip. You're being very quiet. Okay, Mobius strip.
Is the one with the line?
Yes, there you go. That,
okay, I just
there.
didn't remember the
See?
name.
Mobius strip. Okay, okay, so it's single-sided, even though when you let it go, it's got two sides. But for the sake of when you can fold it, note fold, it's got a fold in it, it's got only one side, single-sided, it's a singularity, not because it's unto itself, because this is an infinite move, but because it cannot be doubled. So what else can't be doubled in numbers? 0. Well done. Okay, excellent. See, you do know math. Okay, so I'm just going to skip that for the time being because I think I just want it to sit. Now we can go to page 10. Okay, now. So we're just going to try this last little bit here. He makes the argument in this section of the chapter. He makes the argument now. He's going to try and wrap up this argument. He says basically that one has to understand what he calls the commotion of the spirit. Hegel talks about the spirit, but it's always very pure, or it is pure. It's absolutely pure. As is God supposed to be pure. So you know, note the connection. But for Lyotard, it's got a lot. It has commotion to it. And he said what? Locomotion. No, just commotion. That was funny. Like that. So.
Trying to get the word.
Oh, I see. No, not locomotion.
No, I was just trying to think.
Commotion.
Commotion.
Like noise.
Okay.
Commotion. Making commotion. Okay. And he basically says that he calls them. He uses the pagan. He calls up the pagan sides of the argument by calling forth Dionysius and Bacchus. Actually, it's on page 9. So he basically says, in your work, link into the Dionysian and the Bacchian mood, which he calls, in both cases, singularities. He obviously hates Augustine, but anyway, you'll see in a minute. So he basically says that the whole notion of how the church basically destroyed the pagans. You know, when you go to in Europe mainly, you'll see animals on churches. Did you know why that's there? What's that?
Evil spirits, but it's from the pagan.
Well, it is a church. Why is it on a church?
Yeah, no, but they
just in case.
Yeah, they took on pagan sites, didn't they? The churches, and they took on pagan.
And why did they do that?
Mixed it up together.
Why do you think they did that?
Hedging the bets, I think.
Was that hedging the bets?
Yeah,
That's right. It's like on your deathbed, call everybody.
Yeah.
It's like
appropriating the gods and symbols.
Well, according, yes?
They use it as watersheds, don't they? I just wonder if that's part of it, and the architects use it to wash away stuff.
Well, they also took them because they wanted people to start believing in Christianity. And how are they going to get them to the party if they didn't have familiar objects? So, in fact, they start to divest these nasty-looking creatures of their pagan roots and bring them into, so there's a lot of paganism in Christianity. I mean, Easter, for example, my favorite one, the Easter bunny being a great pagan creature. Just a joke. Anyway, the whole, the whole maypole thing, and it's all very pagan on that side of it. Now, he says that, he basically says that the church poses Bacchus and Dionysian and anything that's sexual as feral, as negative, as bad, or the Bacchian people were demented, or they were crazy, or they weren't that smart, or they were barbarians, and so on and so forth. And basically, so that's why he calls he refers to the way the church operates as the excellent fathers. So he's obviously making fun of them. So he writes, that is how the excellent father prepares the generalized closure of appearances under the name of symptoms. The devaluation of the given function fully, that is to say, emptily. The movement of forces become commotion of the spirit and soon dementia and ementia. The pagans called it Dionysius and Bacchus, names of inestimable singularity. So he goes on to say that the Bacchans, as he calls them, were prey to rage and madness. This cannot be seen in the theater where one only acts. This was, in fact, I could see, is that why you were talking about the mourners, for the theatrics of it?
Yeah, it's just a...
It wasn't just some mad connection you had made.
Yeah, no, it was a rational mourning, like going mourning. There wasn't no... It was like an order, wasn't it? It's like a...
Okay, so in that case, it's not the same thing. The way, what I'm trying to get you to think about is, when you take substances that are other than juice and water, and you change and become wild creatures, does it ever happen to anybody? Has anybody ever had that happen to them? Good. So
I should not smile, should I?
So this idea of letting loose, this idea of letting go, this idea of becoming, either yourself or your wild self, whichever one works for you here. He's talking that this is what he calls divine. This is what he calls the furor of divine. And he said, F-U-R-O-R, furor, madness. So he basically begins to develop the notion of, or the importance of the Dionysian or the Bacchanalian move in order to begin to show how a band, how the libidinal band starts to move, starts to have energy, starts to have intensities. So he says this affirmation of the band, page 10, this banditism is written in a pain which makes the hand tremble. Let's listen to it. This is certainly more important than what is said. This pain is not a sadness. This pain is not a loss of force, but the opposite. It is stamped with an expenditure of important quantities of energy employed to make something bearable which is not bearable. Perhaps the same accumulation of forces, of coincidences. Crying, yelling are within the hand's capability. Figures, meanwhile the hand continues to advance its pen through Dionysius' grooves. Figures of life and death are accumulated, figures which are the same energy fixed for a moment and for an eternity, and which devour it, mistresses of wild beast. What is he talking about here? What is he going on about? Does he sound like he sounds like he just sort of went off into some sort of...
Isn't that the script for True Blood?
Yes, it does, actually. But what is he saying, other than becoming a writer for True Blood?
It's a little bit like the pagan rituals, isn't it? Like the spring rituals where it fully explores the change of seasons with everything that's attached to it. It's like letting go, I suppose, and really celebrating and getting right.
So he's not, yes, so he's not trying to deal with why this works. He's saying that this is how it works. This is how your work works, yes?
There's a lot of, when you're in that state, then truth does come out, doesn't it? That's you abandon.
And what type of truth comes out? Because it's not like
The
everybody's
things
running
that
around
the-
being a
the
liar,
secrets,
right?
The things you're trying to hide, all that sort of thing. And behaviours, I suppose. I mean, psychologically, they come out.
And why is it that that is somehow linked to art? Or in what way is it linked to art? Voice?
Because it comes from the same place.
Which same place?
Because where you create comes from the same place as this hidden place that isn't socially acceptable, it isn't the face or the mask or whatever you do when you're in social situations.
It's not what you're trying to hide, it's what's hiding from you. So it's
That's it.
that element is
Yes.
Hiding from you sometimes, or you try and keep it in at other times. It's not one or the other, is it? That's the point, isn't it? But it's not controllable.
because of social convention. You try and hide it. But you're giving yourself the ability.
I can't quite hear you.
But you're giving yourself the ability to find it.
Yeah, by the opening.
So is it like a life force?
Why are you making a face with life force?
Well, I don't know, it just came to mind because it's almost that it's an energy, isn't it? It's
Yes.
just trying to, but how do you explain it? What is
Do people work in energies here? Would you say that your work in some way uses energy? Everybody's like, so low energy. Yes.
Very much.
Yes. And can you explain that? Can you explain what you mean by very much?
Kind of, well, for me, these kind of frenetic bursts
usually of very fast thinking.
Nice. How about for you? Yeah, Don, what about you?
Well, fast thinking, definitely agree with that.
So I want to know how you harness the intensity. How do you do it?
I have to say it
You have to say it.
before I can write it.
So what do you mean?
So it's almost like I hear it and then I have to say it and then I wrote it and then I say, oh, I've just written that. It's like it wasn't me.
That's interesting. Does anybody else do something like that? Hannah, you do that.
I think someone else said it to me, but I think it's true. When you make a drawing that doesn't look like you made the drawing, you kind of go, oh yes, good drawing. There's something in that drawing.
I want to get this intensity. How many people, you were nodding about the intensity. How do you use intensity in your work?
No, I'm not intentionally using it. I feel it.
Good. And
I
when
mean,
you
I know I plan some of my actions, but when I literally do that, I find myself there and I like feel something. There's a sort of I find myself suddenly there.
This is so important. This is really crucial.
I don't know.
Okay, that's good though. Who else has? John, do you work with intensity?
Yeah, in bouts, yeah.
In bouts.
And the other thing I notice is, because I teach, and that happens with the children as well. You say something and there's an intensity about their creativity in there, and they take it and you don't want to stop it.
Right, because the minute you can feel that intensity happening.
You want to control it, you must.
Okay, good.
Is that the moment when you give a kid a crayon and draw a house? kind of, and like, oh no, that's not how the house looks like, and then you kind of spoil it all, basically, because that is actually a house.
That's right, exactly.
More than everything else. Is that the kind of
No.
list? No.
But it was a very nice example of something else.
Of something else.
But you work in intensity.
I work with many no's before I get the yes. Kind of, that's how it is. It's no, and there's frustration. Like I will feel frustration. Maybe that's this intensity.
Yes, that would be
but there's
intensity.
frustration, like especially when I do an image, especially when there's an image fail, and it's no,
and then when you feel the yes,
it's like
the build-up is done.
Yeah, it's yes, and then I need a minute to stay away from it, and I can look at it, and then I look at it as a first viewer, basically. Then
Interesting.
So it's a moment, and I look at it, it's actually, and maybe one of those no's were more intense than the yes that I felt at the moment. I know, it's quite odd.
That makes sense. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, it's like taking a drag on a cigarette.
Can you explain that? Yeah.
Make a mark. And what Hannah was saying about it happens on paper and then you know.
Yeah.
That brain's in your fingertip.
The brain is in your fingertip. Yeah.
And then you could make. You can make sense of what that mark is.
And so that's pretty much like your Grey's Anatomy thing. The genitals were in the fingertips, basically.
Yeah.
And did people get that when you saw Hannah's thing? I meant your tutorial. But that's really not right. And you guys are just terrible. Bad. Okay.
This place is like that as well. What I picked up.
This place, meaning School of Art. This room.
And these people.
Yes. These people who
quite
are
well.
sitting in the room with you and they can hear you.
The honesty that there is.
Yes.
It enables that freedom to happen. I
Yes.
think it's
Yes, you could say that this is a kind of Dionysian way of learning philosophy, in a sense. This is like this. That's why we had to move out of the other room. It just wasn't going to work. You know. No, Dane, you were going to say something. Sorry.
Go back to this thing about experience, but Lyotard in the assassination experience by
Yes, right. That's right. We've assassinated that word.
Yeah. Yeah, where he says that experience needs an eye and a temporal arrangement in time, and so in order to sort of get to pleasure, to get to that sort of intensity, you need to, one, get rid of the subject, get rid of sort of seeing yourself as the subject, do away with that and just get stuck in it. Don't think about, you know, this ordered measure of time, because when you're sort of in that sort of intensity, any sort of measurement of time goes out of the window. You sort of suck into it.
So time is there, but it's not a measured form.
It's not anchored.
It's an ephemeral form of time. We're getting to the title. Yes.
And also, is there a sort of thing in that paint it's about something about sacrifice, again, to sacrifice the subject, the self.
Yes.
And I suppose again that maybe go back to Derrida, Gift of Death, which again, to go back again to the beginning, he talks about responsibility. Again, talks about how can you be responsible in the act of sacrifice. How can you, like Derrida uses the example of how can you feed one pet cat when there are millions of cats dying of starvation? How can you sort of justify that? How can you still go on, produce artwork after
Auschwitz?
Yeah. So yeah, as well. It all fits together.
Interesting. That's good. I'm glad, because otherwise it'd be a real drag on the course. Yeah. Okay. That's it. Now, Luke, what about you? Do you feel the intent? Do you?
I moment of creation, the moment of witnessing.
Oh, that's interesting.
The audience is the moment of intensity, that setting up of a situation to then allow for that intensity with someone or with audience.
So
because everything is, I don't have that relationship with non-human objects, paint or pencils or paper. There has to be presence and relationship between two.
So when you're writing, for example, when you're writing an essay or whatever,
it's dead until it's read.
But when you're writing it, it feels dead.
Until it's read. It needs to be.
And do you read it?
Alive. Yeah, the only way I can write is to then read with intensity.
Interesting.
To understand and to hear it again. And the same with performance.
Well, that's one of the reasons we read out loud, so you can actually hear it, because hearing it gets into the head better, and then when you read it, you've heard it. So it's again what you were saying. Anybody else? Stuart, what were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking of the Dionysian and like maybe things of losing oneself, and often I think best when I'm trying not to think about the thing, and it links up to that Reynolds said in his discourse. I can't remember the exact, but if you're waiting there, inspiration strike, it doesn't happen, and it's sort of by distraction. I find it's perhaps the intensity of distraction.
That's interesting.
A gentle intensity.
Anybody else have intensity relationships?
I'm wondering about just what you said, like you're waiting for inspiration to strike an idea to come up.
He's saying that doesn't happen.
Well, it doesn't, yeah. But I'm wondering, when it does happen, why some of them will follow through as artists, why sometimes some of them will discard as on the first
cut.
Why does it happen? Why, when did we edit a brain or something thought so much that we're discarding our ideas as they come? Because there's millions of ideas in one coming right now probably to us, and we basically discarding them, and then we think there's remark we make for some other idea that might be something.
Anybody have an answer to that question?
So what we started off with the assemblage and then the whatever that was called. the stuff that's left there, but it's still part of it because it's there. So it's not discarded.
It's kind of
Yeah, it's under reserve. Yeah.
But is it because on some level you think that should be hidden as well? That's
Yeah.
social conventions, so that there's something in there that's, it's like when you think you can say something stupid in here. It's
Never.
like
I think it goes back to your scribbling of the house. It's education.
Let's not get across yet. Okay, let's just push on a little bit. If we can now turn, I want to just get a little bit further. I want to really jump a bit. Yes, I think this is probably the right time to go to page 30. Because I really do want to finish this chapter. So I just want to mention that. Really finishing that. Okay, on page 30, in this section, and a little bit beforehand, he starts to develop, he starts to basically explain what he finds crucial of Freud. And he's basically making the argument, or he's basically saying, look, one of the reasons that Freud is so important, despite some of the idiotic things he comes up with, is that Freud realized that everything is I was going to say tainted, but I don't mean it in enormous. Everything is everything has a sexual mark on it in one's being. That the libido that is in one's brain or brain body, that the libido is human, and it is what makes us human. It is the core of being human. And in the libido, which is why, of course, he's talking about libidinal economy. So in the libido, it's not an arranged, well-ordered form of sexuality. If you've ever had your dreams analyzed, has anybody ever done that? Ever analyze your dreams? Anybody write down their dreams when they have them? Okay, gosh, something you should do actually, just for like the next week, if you can remember. Write down your dream the minute you wake up, not like too much later because you won't remember them. And bring them in next week. Maybe we can do a couple of dream things. I'll show you why, because you learn just how psychotic you are. No, you learn how the sexual goes into everything you're doing. And remember when you're dreaming, by the way, that everything in the dream is you. Everything. So if you dream about your father or your mother, it's a projected you. But we'll get through that. Anyway, the point is that what Freud is saying, or what Lyotard is taking from Freud, is that one's being is always already sexual before it is anything else. And this sexualness, this thing, basically is what he's calling the drive, the pulsional, the impetus. It's not really a drive, it's because he doesn't mean it in a natural sense. He doesn't mean it in an instinctual sense. It pushes, moves you. And there are basically what he calls, working with Freud, he says, look, there are two main principles. There's the death drive, thanatos, and eros, pleasure. There's the pleasure principle and the death drive. And they are both sexual. If there is any way to understand the sexual, one needs to understand it in terms of the death drive and the pleasure principle. And by pleasure, he's not talking about, slapping your knee and laughing. He's talking about, I mean, but, or to put it slightly differently, if slapping your knee makes you laugh, it is because there's a sexual exchange. Okay. Even the computer got into that.
Laughter's always sexual.
Yes. Okay, everybody starts weeping now again in class. Okay, so he basically says that these principles that he's going to like sort of develop are always projected. So this is how one actually, quote, perceives. This is why I've banned perception in the class. Because the word perceive implies that something goes in. You're perceiving something. It goes into this, you know, into the dark hole, and you get it. No, perception is all about projection. This is the big contribution of Freud. That all perception is socially, let's say, engineered, because it is about projection. It's not about, you know, being born with something and then you get it. It's the other way. So he basically wants to explain how this coming to life gets rendered. And so what he begins to develop in the ephemeral skin is that he tries to show how you have the importance of privileging the sensuous as a projection onto any surface. And that he basically makes the claim that under a fascist environment, it's the first thing that goes. It's the first attack, is to rid people of the sexual. So if you go to page 31, he basically explains that these principles are not duality. No, wait, that's what I didn't say. No, sorry. He basically says that if you are going to deal with libidinal economy and become a libidinal economist, i.e. an artist, he basically makes the argument that one has to become in touch with or be touched by, in the sexual sense, touched by your libido. Quote, "It is therefore necessary that what one thinks can always be assignable to a theoretical ensemble if you get rid of the sensuous." So he says, like the semantic, the formal, it matters little, and shown equally to despair of such an assignation. It is necessary to alter the course of the destiny that pushes through toward the concept. Otherwise, one will manufacture a libidinal economy which will resemble a trivial political economy. That is to say, an ideology with the pretension to order, incapable of grasping the duplicity of the said economic movements. It is necessary to let the alleged theoretical field be swept by the tumult of intensities, even the most difficult to accept theoretically. No one can say that he will be up to such a task. Everyone seeks to flee these intensities and their undecidability in the direction of the system and its binary ideal. It is true that the price to pay for these ideas is extraordinarily inflated and renders the business hardly profitable when it is compared to this rich man's activity, which is the labor of the concept. So I'm talking about Hegel here, which makes sense of the least scrap of material and whose process of accumulation appears infallible. With a hypothesis, but this is not a hypothesis, evidently, it is not discussed, and one need not wait for the alleged facts in order that it be falsified or remain acceptable. With this hypothesis, with the position of the two instances, one is plunged into fallibility precisely because one thinks without criteria of falsification, because the criteria of true and false is irrelevant to the idea when this latter is intensely spun top. What is an intensely spun top? And one is plunged into the greatest anguish, for really, sirs, radical socialist of the concept, we are not stupid, we are well aware of what profile can be seen on the horizon of thought as libido, the same scarecrow which you get out of your pockets and wave about your fleshy ears each time an intensity goes past, and we jump, crazy with joy and fear, into its world, the scarecrow of fascism, the same as the one you were waving in '68 in France, in Germany, in Italy. You don't have to be pushed very hard before you come right out with it. Idea-force is fascism. You will always confuse power with force. You will always call the violence that threatens your power, power terror. So, I guess what he tries to get into, we're not going to have time to get into this section called Use Me. So look it up because it's an important thing. But he gets into, he tries to now develop how one deals with an asystematic, not really material system. He's trying to show how this zero, this great zero, is sexual, that it contains these intensities, and that intensities are the forebearers, although there's not a temporal before and after, but just so I can explain it to you in some logical fashion. The forebearers of an event, a node, a way in which a discursive environment is set up. What Deleuze and Guattari will develop as rhizome, this little sporing, what does then bring on the decalcomania. Okay? So next week, I mean, we can continue with libidinal economy. I'm not sure, what would you like to do? Because next week, does anybody have the schedule in front of them? Or can get the schedule? Technically, what we were supposed to be doing for next week, because I already took an extra week on this. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I did kind of want to get into quantum physics with you. But I guess, yeah. Okay, I have two questions to ask you. Supposedly, the course ends on the 21st, is that correct? Yeah, or does it go on after Easter? No, it all ends. Right. That's like in 2 weeks. So we have a choice upon us. One is that I have to get you your questions. I'm not sure when they're due. Does anybody know when these things are due?
19th, 18th.
Oh, great, okay. Okay, good. They have to change, anyway. Well, let's keep that date. I'll get you the questions and I'll send them around. But do you want me to get into quantum physics with you right now, or do we continue on Lyotard? It's up to you.
Quantum physics is quite wide, isn't it?
It is wide. Yes.
So we have two more lectures.
Yes.
Should cover
it. So would you rather we just stick with libidinal economy?
It seems very important for us to understand this being artists. So.
Okay, so I will secretly give a little bit of quantum physics, just so you've heard it, so I feel like I have delivered what I said I would deliver for you. But next week then, you can read the rest of, if you can actually read the Tensor again, really read it this time. Especially the sections on use me, use and abuse me. And also if you can bring in your dreams. I think that would be very helpful because I can show you how it operates as libidinal fields. Okay.
Do you mind?
Yeah. Do you want to?
Yes.
Okay. Well, see, that's good because what I find annoying is that the course really should have more than 11 or 12 weeks to them.
That seems very short though. It seems like much more short than the last.
Doesn't it?
I don't know.
Are you sure we're supposed to? It is. I feel shorter because it is shorter. It is shorter.
Yeah.
How many weeks did we have in first?
Because it was long.
It was a long swap, huh? It's short, so.
Oh, okay. Right. Righty, righty. Okay. Onward to victory in the revolution.